Good day to you, fight fans. It's your boy, Jack Slack, the Slack Beast up in this hoe, and it's episode 20 of the Fights Gone By podcast. In the aftermath of UFC 206, Glory Collision, Bellator something, and boxing awful. No, there was some good boxing on this weekend. Got tons to talk about, actually, so let's dive right into it with Max Holloway versus Anthony Pettis, because that's the fight that we're all talking about, and it's the fight we should all be talking about. Max Holloway has been the heir apparent to the featherweight division for a while now. He's been long due a title shot. He's just taken his winning streak to 10, which is absurd. And he became the first person to finish Anthony Pettis, so that's a nice bonus. Lots of interesting looks from Holloway in this fight. Something that was very important to my eye for the prospective rematch with Conor McGregor, use of the low-line sidekick. That you'll remember that was the technique that Conor McGregor used a ton to keep Max Holloway out at range and get him backing up. Because Max Holloway is a long-rangey guy who likes to dart in and out with his strikes and stay on the end of his opponent's reach, McGregor did a very good job of using the low-line sidekick and then chaining that into very taekwondo-y offense. In taekwondo, if you start a kick in range, you normally... what they do is what they like to call the cut kick. Cut kick, very different in all sorts of martial arts. Cut kick in Muay Thai generally means you kick underneath the opponent's checking leg and you take out their standing leg. Cut kick in karate can mean step up, lead leg, round kick. Cut kick in taekwondo, or at least Olympic taekwondo, is that sort of gliding side kick. In fact, a lot of guys do it with a very shallow chamber. They don't even bend their leg very much. It's that one where in the Olympics you're like, why are they just hopping at each other with their legs straight out? But if you can do it to the knee, the kneecap of the front leg, or just on the top of the shin or the bottom of the thigh, you can keep extending that leg out just with your weight and force the opponent to either move or take the leg away. So what McGregor was doing was he'd throw in that low-line sidekick, and then as Holloway began moving away in anticipation, McGregor would follow with the jumping switch kick, and then the left hand after that. It was a very unusual fight strategy for Conor McGregor, who is normally... Well, most of his fights he looks the same, but that fight stands out as something where he did something completely different because he was faced with this unique opponent. And of course he took Holloway down. Lots of people will talk about the ACL injury, but that came passing the guard. That was it's a nasty moment if you go back and pinpoint the moment where it happens. He's knee sliding through Holloway's guard, and Holloway sort of comes up almost in the Lucas Lecce style position, but without the underhook, so he can't actually get up to his knees. But he's wrenching on that trapped leg, and McGregor falls off balance for a moment, and his leg straightens, and there's all this lateral pressure on the side of his knee, and it looks horrible. Lateral pressure on your knee, avoid it at all costs. It's the number one way to get your knees fucked up. Anyway, so Holloway was doing a ton of that, which was really interesting. He was also interchanging that with genuine tapping side kicks to the front of the leg, and then he'd pick up his leg and step it down, missing deliberately, so that his foot was outside of Pettis' lead foot. So getting into the dominant position for his right hand, and then he'd throw the right hand to the body. Right hand to the body, not something very powerful technique, something I'm going to sing the praises of this week, because there was a lot of it going on, but there are dangers to it, obviously, and Matt Brown showed that with the jab to the body that got him head kicked. And against Conor McGregor, particularly, which we're always thinking about with Max Holloway, he's never going to be separated from McGregor until he either beats him or loses to him again. That match is one that all the fans want to see. Everyone at featherweight now, especially with this whole interim title deal, is going to be compared to McGregor. So there was lots of interesting stuff in this fight that I thought would work well against McGregor, but the right hand to the body, very dangerous against a guy who's going to skip offline on that open side and look for the left hand over the top. But terrific technique if you can land it. Another one that Holloway was using that I thought would be very useful against McGregor, lead leg kick to the outside of the opponent's lead leg. Whenever Pettis was in southpaw stance, he'd try and buckle that knee inward. That's the kick you want to be using against someone like McGregor with a nice long bladed stance. Inside low kicks, which Eddie Alvarez had success with a few of. They're going to work more because the stance is long and you can punt the leg out of place anyway. but you are almost always kicking into the shin. It's a lot easier for them to turn their foot in and check it than it is for them to pick their leg up, turn it around, and check to the outside. But Anthony Pettis did an unusual thing and came out mainly fighting orthodox. He's one of those fighters where he does a lot of switch hitting, but he doesn't fluidly move between the two very well. You know, Max Holloway does a lot of things where in motion, he'll hide his stance switch. And there was a great one against Cub Swanson where he performed a sidestep to change stances and then immediately back kicked from his new stance. So a leg that couldn't have back kicked before, because it was the lead leg, was suddenly back kicking. But Anthony Pettis tends to sort of circle, stop, change stances. Now I'm going to do whatever I do off this side. And if it's the right leg forward, you know that left kick is the thing you're going to have to deal with. If it's the left foot forward, it's normally the 1-2, and occasionally the step up left high kick. But yeah, he fought most of the fight orthodox, so you didn't. What you saw actually was Max Holloway is a guy who likes switch hitting, and that has taught him how to approach each stance matchup. I think that's something that a lot of coaches could learn from, and a lot of fighters could learn from. The act of training both stances, you know, even in a half-assed nature, teaches you the difference between an open guard or open position and closed guard / closed position matchup. And if you're thinking about it in terms of those principles, it doesn't matter which leg you end up on. As long as you can identify which leg the opponent's got forward, you can do something. When Pettis was orthodox, there were some nice front kicks with the ball of the foot into the top of the shin, which I've seen taught as a self-defense technique for years, but and obviously it hurts. I mean, nobody likes being kicked in the shin, especially with the ball of the foot or toes if you've got boots on in a self-defense situation or whatever. But I'd never really seen it done in mixed martial arts or kickboxing, and that was interesting. The interesting switch came about, first round was mainly Holloway moving forward. Second round, third round was Pettis trying to be the aggressor, and that was when Holloway was moving away, letting the punches fall short or land on his guard, and then when he was countering, he'd always try and get in a body shot too. There was so much body work going on in this fight, and a lot of it was very low-key. It's the same with front snap kicks. If you're not really looking for them, they can go unnoticed, but they're always there digging in. And it's the same with body shots. You know, if you're not looking for them, you can miss one or two sinking in every half a minute or so. So yeah, lots of body work from Pettis, Holloway, which I really enjoyed. Pettis attempted a nice taekwondo-y switch kicky thing, 3 kicks in rapid succession, tap, 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 you know, the jumping from one leg to the other. Looked great, got a rise out of the crowd. Didn't really do much. Pettis unfortunately broke his hand, or at least injured his right hand during this fight, so he was left without one weapon. And to be honest, as varied as we used to think that Pettis was as a striker, outside the left round kick, his front kicks looked good in this fight actually, and occasional side kicks, but he didn't really commit to it much. He can be a little bit one note in his boxing. It's just 1-2, 1-2. And really, if you hurt your hand, the more weapons you have that aren't your hand, the better off you are. This is something that Joe Rogan used to talk about years ago. He'd say, like, if Giorgio Petrosian broke one hand, he'd be pretty much okay because he's got 2 elbows, 1 hand, and 2 legs and 2 knees. But a lot of fighters, when they break one hand, they're just lost. Another cool thing that Max Holloway was doing was stepping all the way through to kick that back leg. Very knockdown karate-style technique. Swept Pettis a couple of times with that, which was really cool. Finish came, I don't like using the word ironically, because Alanis Morissette has slaughtered it. But ironically, it was pretty cool that Holloway used sort of taekwondo to stop the taekwondo, and body kicks to stop the body kicker. Pettis was walking him down, he spun for the back kick, caught him right in the breadbasket. Pettis did a good job of not showing it on his face, but it immediately went from him pursuing Holloway to him backing off. And that's when Holloway moved in, left hook into a right body kick, I think it was, and then another body kick, and then just a flurry along the fence. And Holloway does these really nice shoe shines. He's done them for years. He used to do them. He was doing them against Bermudez. That was the first fight that I really thought this Holloway kid is going to be something special, or could be something special. And that was still when he'd throw away rounds by using jumping knees and nothing else. But he had these shades of great boxing and combination work and counters. So he just melted Pettis along the fence and picked up the stoppage. It was very, very impressive. You know, as much as people say that Pettis is losing a step, it was a struggle against Eddie Alvarez. Even in the fight with RDA where he was put through the ringer, he was there for the full 5 rounds. And Barboza picked him apart at distance, but, you know, Pettis was never giving up. This fight, he was blown out of the water. And a lot of people have asked me what happened to Pettis. I like talking about the technical stuff and the strategic stuff. And one of the reasons that I like to heap praise on the winner rather than point out all the stuff that the loser did wrong is because fighting is accumulation of everything that's happened in both fighters' lives up to then, and you're also getting a snapshot of what's going on with them at that moment. And none of us is in Anthony Pettis' head. Everything from nutrition to what's going on in a fighter's personal life can get in the way. So I don't want to jump in with, this is what happens. This is what happened to Pettis. His aura's gone, blah, blah, blah. He could be going through some hard stuff in his own life. He had his cars torched on his drive. It's just insane that you can have all that pride in your city and they're still happy to torch your cars as soon as you have any success. Oh, dear. Yeah, I hope he can get it back together. I mean, for a while, when Gilbert Melendez could do nothing to him, and Gilbert Melendez has looked competitive in every fight since and up to that, when Gilbert Melendez could do nothing to him, we were all thinking this guy is special. And I think he is special. I think that he's had some knocks to his confidence. He's obviously been trying to find out something new that will work for him because he went down to Jackson's for a while and was training both there and Duke Rufus's. He needs to take a step back and a step down in competition. Maybe take a couple of tune-ups. There are guys in the top 15 of either lightweight or featherweight who would make interesting fights for Pettis, and we'd be able to see if it's really an ongoing downward hill, or if he can regain some form and some confidence. There seems to be a marked lack of urgency and confidence there. And those aren't technical things. Those are to do with his own demons and all that sort of other stuff. So I don't want to get too much into saying, oh my god, why didn't he do this or that or the other? But what we should be focusing on is how awesome Max Holloway is. Not just looked in that fight, but is generally. I got written down here on my show notes, talk about Holloway versus Aldo and Holloway versus McGregor 2. I think McGregor's probably done at featherweight now. He's taken 10 months off or whatever it is, and he's almost definitely going to go straight back to lightweight because he doesn't like cutting to featherweight. I don't think anyone is, with any sense is actually that bothered about him being stripped of the title. I think they're only really bothered because of the interim business and the fact that the UFC would have kept the title on the guy who wasn't going to defend it just as long as they needed to, as long as he's the simultaneous champion for 2 weeks or whatever it was. But Holloway versus McGregor 2 interests me. I very much like the kicking work that Holloway was doing. He was doing some nice stuff, like he'd raise a knee and then he'd come in behind it with punches. Very normal stuff. Very important to differentiate. If you're trying to box from kicking range, which you are in MMA mostly, unless both guys have had like a gentleman's agreement to just bang. Mostly you're boxing from kicking range. The distance is much greater than a boxing match. So one of the nice ways to get in is to raise a knee or get them expecting kicks and then move in. Superman punch is an extreme example of that, but that sort of stuff. What Holloway was doing, which was really cool, was he'd raise a knee or throw out a fake, like a half-assed kick, and then he'd immediately duck in behind it. Similar to the old jab and duck, the thing that Roberto Duran was always doing. Because if you throw the jab out and then you duck whatever comes back at you off that jab, good chance of it missing, and you're going to be able to move in while that's happening, and the opponent's opening up. And Holloway was able to do that by kick and ducking, and then come in with the body shots or the punches to the head afterwards. The knockdown in I think it was the second round, came off that, and he was just doing it all the way through. Very cool. Holloway versus Aldo is interesting. I think Holloway would probably have more success on the feet than Edgar did. A lot of what Edgar got drawn into was running at Aldo. And Edgar had mad success through both fights with the low kick to the back of Aldo's leg when he pivoted off, because that's what happens when you pivot. You anchor that leg. And often the back of it is exposed. And it was absolutely bizarre that no one in Edgar's corner was telling him just to stick to the low kicks, because they were completely unanswered through 3 rounds, or 2 or 3 rounds in that fight, and then in the last 2 he was just running at him, and you were like, why? Just keep pounding in that low kick. You don't have to kick as hard as Jose Aldo to score with low kicks, and if you can score with 30 or 40 of them and he's not checking them, you're going to do some damage anyway. You don't have to be able to snap a guy's femur in one kick like Aldo can. So that would be interesting. But the main interesting thing is that Aldo is so much better on the counter than he is on the lead. And that's always been the case if you go back to the Hominick fight and things like that. But obviously he very famously lost to McGregor by being, well, as much as I don't like to do the whole he got in his head thing, it was very clear that Conor McGregor had riled Aldo up and he moved in on him, came out of his shell almost immediately, which you never see Aldo do. He's a slow starter and he's a very conservative fighter. And McGregor laid him out. I think if Max Holloway can draw Aldo forward, that's the better fight for him. Get him reaching counter. And continue to work the body and the legs, because those don't go anywhere. Aldo has very good head movement, generally, if he's working on defensive. So let's talk about some of the other fights from UFC 206 first, because it was a terrific card. Firstly, it reminded us, Jesus Christ, Canada has a lot of good fighters. Everyone's upset because they didn't get GSP in time for this card, but TriStar has just been producing killers for years. I was really impressed by, well, firstly, my boy Zach Makovsky was on the card. He's a cool guy. But my boy Mitch Gagnon was back. Gagnon looked rusty because he'd been out 700 days, which is absolutely insane. That's almost Kid Yamamoto style layoff. But he looked good through the opening round and then dropped the decision. That guy's a talent. He was doing a little bit of what he did in the Barao fight. He'll jab and duck, as we were talking about, and then he'll come in on the single collar tie, which is an interesting position because you can box off it, you can try and set up takedowns, but it's not a strict clinch. It's not a smothering clinch. And he used that really effectively against Barao. Didn't have quite as much success against Lopez. Olivier Aubin-Mercier. My French accent's terrible because I'm English and we hate them. So we go over there and we point to things on menus and butcher names. Boucher names. But he was really impressive, Aubin-Mercier, against Drew Dober. The commentators were talking about Dober's... Well, firstly, Mike Goldberg says Drew Dober, the world national Muay Thai champion. What the fuck is that? That's like the World Series, which America wins every year. Very well done. Or the WWE World Title and Intercontinental. Is that not World? Anyway, so Mercier had... I didn't know he was training at TriStar at the time. I'd not seen him for a while. I'd forgotten who he trained with. To be honest, I'd forgotten who he was. But as soon as he came out standing upright with that nice bouncing in and out jab, I was like, this lad's training at TriStar. Waited for the corner between rounds. Oh, yep, there's Faras. And that jab just took him apart with it. It was beautiful. Did a nice slip to inside position and came up with a left hook in the first round, but got caught doing the same thing later on. But that jab just took Dober apart. And that was interesting because as a southpaw, Mercier is often going to have to contend with that lead hand. But Dober was also a southpaw, so he got, he was treated to this fight where his lead hand could just be opened up on this guy's face. And Dober was standing with the high forearms guard and not really doing anything about the jab. And the finish came from a knee bar sweep, and then took the back, got the rear naked choke. Decent fight, but the stand-up was the bit that really impressed me about that. Serkinov versus Krylov. Both these guys have been making noise in the light heavyweight division, and they are a nice reminder that as desperate as the light heavyweight division is, Shogun Rua is not top 10 guy. These guys are top 10 guys, and guys like Shogun and Rashad are just there being advertised, but these are the ones you should be paying attention to. End of this one was interesting because Krylov came off the fence out of a clinch with the lead leg high kick, which was something that Andy Hug used to do. He'd come out of the clinch and he'd pick the lead foot up off the floor and try and kick him over the head, straight from the floor to the jaw, basically. And it used to work okay for Andy Hug, but the danger is that you're badly out of position and recovering on one leg while the guy's still in range of you if you fail to push him out and catch him with the kick. So he throws up this kick and then a left hand comes back down the pipe, knocks him silly. Serkinov picks up the guillotine choke. Decisive victory, but I was impressed by both in that fight. So, slap them in with some of the old timers and just watch them pick up some nice big name wins. Emil Mick versus, or Meck, whatever his name is, versus Jordan Mean. Great to see Jordan Mean back, but I was absolutely stunned when, well, it was a Goldie fact, so it could not be true, but they said it was 600 days since he last fought, and I remember writing that retirement piece like it was yesterday. That's scary. But that's more me reflecting on my own mortality than anything. Good fight. Main looked comfortable, but like he'd been out of action for a while. And this, along with Swanson versus Choi, a reminder that slick striking can be overwhelmed. Mech did a very good job late in the first round, I think it was, and up until getting the takedowns in the other rounds. Just sort of crowding and overwhelming Mean. You know, if you don't give the guy with the nice clean counter-striking space to do that, he can start, well, puts a ticking clock on you, first of all, which is where, well, the wrestlers do this too, but if you're worried about getting crowded and you're trying to pick your shots, you start taking shots that you perhaps shouldn't, and getting into these exchanges more readily. The examples we always give are of guys who've been taken down. Well, JDS versus Kane is a great example. You get taken down, beaten up for a round. Next round, you're worrying about that, so you try and take the guy's head off with the first punch that he shows you, basically. And you open yourself up even more. Actually, Cub Swanson versus Frankie Edgar is a great example of that. Now, Cub Swanson, he is an OG boy. Loved him since back in WEC. I think he might go down as one of the best fighters to never win a title. It's not too late to win a title, but I doubt he is going to win a title before he retires now. He does lots of interesting stuff, like the lead left hook into the low kick off the same side and all that sort of weird stuff. But against Choi, what got him by was aggression. Choi is a thoughtful, measured counter-striker with a big right hand, likes to set up his openings and draw out specific attacks from his opponent and try and counter over or inside the lead hand. But Swanson did his best when he just didn't give Choi any space. And you were looking at it going, this is chaos. He's going to run onto a punch eventually. And he did several times. But by making the fight into that chaos, he kept Choi's head down and kept him under fire and didn't give him the nice openings where, you know, a lot of the counter-punching game is in identifying the opponent's move to close the distance. It's that trying to close the range that gets people countered. Whereas if you're already up against someone and the fence is on their back and you're just swinging wild, it's very hard to pick out good counterpunches while that's happening. So that was easy contender for Fight of the Year. The way this always works is that just as I'm starting to think about the Slacky Awards, which I do for Fightland, you start trying to think about your Fight of the Year, and then like 4 candidates will come along in the last month, and you forget all the great stuff that happened in January and February. Kelvin Gastelum versus Tim Kennedy. Sad to see Tim Kennedy suffer such a brutal stoppage. There was a little bit of the Kid Yamamoto versus Esteban, whatever his name was, the random wrestler they brought in from the Olympics with no fights to fight Kid Yamamoto after he threatened to retire. Kid put him down to his knees with a knee to the gut, and he was just like tapping the guy's head, looking at the referee, going, "Please stop this! I don't want to hit this guy." There was a little bit of that at the end, but Gastelum had to work to get there. Kennedy was riding all over him from the back. A couple of nice attempts at an arm roll from Gastelum. He was, you know, when they're up on hands and feet, that Nick Diaz, George St. Pierre position. He cross-gripped one of Kennedy's arms and tried to grip his leg and roll. First time got his back taken as a result. Second time worked a lot better. But big fan of arm rolls. They're really cool. Gastelum's hands still fire. He used nice left straight to the body, which I said we were going to bring up. Straight to the body, fantastic. Great way to sap a guy. And a great unprotected opening. If a guy is on the defensive, he'll cover his head, you know, and his ribs. He can't really cover his solar plexus all that well, especially against the cage when he starts to square up. So just brilliant work from Gastelum there, stopping Kennedy. Kennedy had a long time off. And the other thing to remember is that he's been lining up fights for a while now. He's been in and out of camp, getting ready, being disappointed, and then trying to fight again. So that takes it out of you, and he is, 37. So he's an old dog in this game, and he's had a long layoff. He's been in a state through the last few months where he's been getting ready for something and then having it pulled out from under him and getting ready again. So not the best Tim Kennedy we're going to see. I hope he can get a couple of good wins under his belt before he turns 40. But having that victory over Michael Bisping is going to be important for a little while, until Bisping loses at least. Cerrone versus Matt Brown was terrific. You saw Matt Brown basically overreacting to the threat of the body kick, worrying about it too much, and those left high kicks were sneaking in almost undefended each time. And then the final time he was bending down as he going for the body jab as he was going for it, leant right into the kick. The other times he'd been upright, he could sort of take him, his body swayed with it, but he was leaning right down into it. Great job by both men, actually. I thought a really good fight. Bit of a messy fight at times. Not the best defensive form of Cerrone's career. And also very cautious Matt Brown. Cautious Matt Brown doesn't do very well. And that's one of the things that Robbie Lawler did so well against Matt Brown. As soon as Matt Brown came out, he hit him as hard as he could with the first counter. And it was a gamble, because, that's a dangerous thing to do. But it really paid off because Matt Brown suddenly started being an in-and-out kickboxer, which Matt Brown is not. Matt Brown's strength has always been getting in guys' faces and tiring them by having them run away from him while he's trying to hit them. So an absolutely crackerjack night of fights. We don't even need to talk about the UFC Fight Night because it was jank. There was, that was a really low-effort card they put together. Glory was terrific too. Big shout-out to Cedric Doumbé, Cameroonian French kickboxer. I had scarcely seen any of him before they signed him to fight Nicky Holzken. And he took what Myrtle Groenhart showed in the first fight with Holzken, and he used it perfectly. Like, his coaches had clearly watched that fight and built around it. Because Holzken, what Groenhart showed the first time was that while Holzken will get you to the ropes constantly, when you come off the ropes, he'll put his earmuffs on and you'll struggle to land a clean punch on him. But he's not the most active counterpuncher in the world. And also, he never checks low kicks. They showed a stat about midway through the third where Doumbé had thrown something like 40 punches and landed, 10 of them or something. He was working at a 20% rate with his hands, but he'd landed 47 out of 50 low kicks. So you're working at a 90% connection rate with your low kicks. That's absolutely incredible. And that's exactly what Groenhart had done. He'd throw a flurry off the rope to come off the ropes, throw in a low kick, and then circle to the other side of the ring and do it again when he got his back to the ropes. Doumbé was great. The other thing that he did was rile Holzken up. If you've seen the footage of Holzken decking Michael Johnson in a sparring session, he can be drawn into gamesmanship. Basically, he can be goaded into fighting harder than he should be. And Doumbé did that by every time Holzken missed a kick or a punch, he'd look off into the audience to see where it landed and shit like that. And then as soon as Holzken tried to do a bit of hot dogging of his own, Doumbé jumped on him with punches. It reminded me of James Toney versus Roy Jones, where Roy Jones does that hands out, come on, hit me thing, goes back into his guard. Toney does the same thing. Roy Jones immediately jumps on him. And that's how he scored, I think it was the only knockdown of that fight. But if you can get a 10-8 round off on prime James Toney for a cheap trick, you're not going to say no to it. And then Badr Hari versus Rico was absolutely insane. Not a lot happened in the fight. I mean, all you saw really was that Badr could jab Rico up, and was a lot better than we all thought he was at this stage in his career. And then there was that freak arm injury which called the fight off. But the main thing was they had this fight in Germany because I'm assuming Badr Hari still can't get back into the Netherlands without legal trouble, or maybe he can. I don't know, because Mike was there from Mike's gym, and Mike's gym is in the Netherlands. So I don't know what Harry's state is with the Netherlands customs and immigration, but they had this fight in Germany and the place was filled with rabid Harry fans and rabid Rico fans. But this fight, the build-up was incredible. You don't see stuff like that very often. Every time there's a stare down, I'm like, oh, theatre, that's good. But the start of this fight, they got him in the ring, they introduced him, and they stared at each other. And Badr Hari had this face of, not a lot of people like I'd be genuinely scared of, with a stare down, because mostly it's silly bollocks. But Badr Hari's unhinged. He's got, I think the guy at his trial said he's got narcissistic tendencies and a real case of, do you even know who I am? But the guy has a serious chip on his shoulder. He's an incredibly violent streak, and he's just about the best knockout artist that heavyweight kickboxing's ever seen. And he's shown that he's happy to do that to people who aren't kickboxers too. So, very scary guy. I mean, absolutely deplorable in most of his antics, but such a talent and such a scary, scary man. And they showed it, like, his entourage of about 40 people going mental on the ring apron. And then the ushers were desperately trying to get people in their seats so that they could start the fight. And the whole time, Rico and Badr are just staring at each other. And it reminded me of Ben versus Eubank. I wrote an article about that called Christ, What a Right Hand. Such a good fight. And they absolutely hated each other. And the opening moments are just them staring at each other. And it's like the referee holds off on starting the contest just because he wants to see a bit more of that. But like they had to, in this fight, Rico versus Badr, they had to go over the loudspeaker. We cannot start the fight until you get in your seats, and beg people to sit down. And the fight broke out in the audience, and Rico and Badr didn't even care. They were just staring at each other. Fucking awesome. So, bit of a disappointing ending, but if we thought Badr Hari was done, he's not. I was blown away with how much difficulty Rico Verhoeven was having in the first round. He did nothing of note in that first round, and he had a pre-existing cut on his nose, which was split open, and he had blood all around his eye. And Harry looked like he hadn't been touched except for this big bulge in his forearm. Such a strange finish. You know, Badr Hari is an omen of chaos. You're going to get some bad stuff happen if he turns up. You know, you'll get fights in the crowd, near riot, have trouble getting people in their seats, and then a weird ending like this. But the rematch is basically assured, and I'll be there. I can't wait for that. Right, let's get on to the listener mail section of today's podcast. Hey Jack, first off I'd like to say you're a huge inspiration to me, and keep up the fantastic work. Buttery. I'm actually coming to you for some life advice, brackets, no seriously I am. I'll give you the story as short as I can make it, so please bear with me. I'm 18 years old, and I'm just finishing up my first semester of university. I've come to find out that I'm not a huge fan of electrical engineering. I want to be a professional fighter. Brackets, I know, crazy, but please suspend your disbelief. Here's the thing. I've done no training of any sort, and while my dream is crazy, I want to at least try. Brackets, by the way, I'm not dropping out of school to pursue fighting. I want to start training like a fiend on the side and see how it goes. So my question is, what should I start training first? Of course, the correct answer is everything, but with limited time or money, I have to pick one or two of the big four. I was thinking of doing Muay Thai, while keeping kickboxing more in mind while training, and training to have a good guard, and saying fuck the wrestling because in professional MMA, there are guys who have been wrestling so long, I can't really catch up. So I'll try and develop a lethal guard so that they're hesitant to take me down. Also, if you would be kind enough to offer your thoughts on how to start training for MMA, I'd be very appreciative. My basic plan is to educate myself as much as possible in fighting, and applying that to my training as opposed to just training whatever the coach tells me, unless it's someone like Viras Sahabi, of course. Anyway, thanks for listening to the ramblings. Keep up the fantastic work. Okay, I'm going to be nice about this, but a little bit brutal at the start. You're aspiring to get into a career that, even at the highest levels, doesn't pay that well, and for which you will take brain damage. But with that out of the way, it's not as ridiculous to think that you could get to a good level as many would imply. This is a sport with very low boundaries of entry, and very few top-level athletes are coming to MMA young, or getting into the game early. So catching up, not impossible. In fact, if there's one thing that the success of the Straight Blast Gym and Conor McGregor have shown, it's that you don't need a world-class facility to build a world-class fighter. You know, McGregor and Tom Egan spent their early years in a shed on Tom Egan's parents' farm or whatever it was, and then moved to, I think it was the second incarnation of the Straight Blast Gym, which was also basically just 4 walls and some mats. Now, if there is a top-level MMA gym near you, even better. Now, not having trained anything is going to be a bit of a disadvantage. I was thinking through this before the show, and I realised that my personal background in martial arts has completely coloured my answers to this question, because I started trying to work out which element would be less detrimental to work on your own on the back burner while you're going and getting coaching on the other elements. And to me, that was, you should definitely go and train BJJ because you need a training partner, or as many training partners as possible. Ideally, you want lots of sparring partners to strike with, but you can, work the double end bag, the heavy bag, so on, shadow box rounds on your own. But that was me jumping the gun, because obviously if you don't know how to do all the kicks and strikes and things, there's no one there to correct you when you're doing them wrong. So that piece of advice is out the window. There is nothing you can do on the back burner while you're training the first martial art. I would, however, say that if you're aiming to get into MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or at least some form of submission grappling, is an absolute must. That's the starting place, because you can have good grappling and shit stand-up with a few tricks on the feet and win fights both on the feet and on the ground, or you can have shit grappling and incredible stand-up and still lose fights in both areas because of the grappling. If you're still in school, Jiu-Jitsu is also considerably easier to explain away if you're turning up with bruises and bumps, because you don't tend to get black eyes from Jiu-Jitsu unless you've done something very wrong. However, there are also benefits to getting into kickboxing and Muay Thai early, in that it will quickly tell you firstly, how you react to getting hit, and secondly, if you want to get hit for, the rest of your MMA career. There are plenty of people who take up martial arts, and then once they take a good knock, they realise, okay, I'm not that keen on that happening again. And we could say develop amazing defence, but even guys like Giorgio Petrosian get hit hard from time to time. It happens. Really, though, none of that matters if you're not going to turn up in shape. The most valuable thing you can do for yourself is, before you get any coaching, make sure that you're doing road work, as close to every day as you can do, or at least something of a cardio nature. Because firstly, for a fighter, there's no more valuable element than conditioning, and it's something that you're constantly building on. If you leave it for a while, it'll start disappearing. And guys build on it throughout their entire career. Fights are won and lost on who gets tired first, basically. But secondly, it also makes taking in the stuff you're being coached on an awful lot easier if you're not, every time someone stops to explain something, gasping for air, ultimately, it's going to be... I don't want the weight of your career decisions on my shoulders, but I would say search for a BJJ club, get into... if there's an MMA gym in the area, sign up. But if there's a grappling club in the area, sign up to that. Train as often as you can. Do a shit ton of road work. And in time off, try to drill the very basics of striking. And there's all sorts of things that you can work on that you won't be too detrimental when you actually do turn up to a Muay Thai or a boxing gym. 1-2s on the heavy bag. Very hard to fuck those up too badly. Sock on a string, you've made yourself a slip bag. You're working on your head movement. And if you own a heavy bag, you can use it for knees and kicks and all sorts if you're feeling confident. And the other wonderful thing about Jiu-Jitsu is that there's a pretty thriving competitive scene. If you're in one of those countries that has a good BJJ scene, you can compete fairly often, and that is also good for when you actually want to start competing as a fighter. So, ideal scenario, join an MMA gym. If you're really doing it on the cheap because you're a student, BJJ, conditioning, heavy bag. It'll put you in good stead when you want to start training both, or training the whole shebang. What's good, Jackie boy? I'd like to say that first that I'm a big fan of your writing, your insight, breakdowns, philosophy, blah, 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 blah. Now that you're nice and buttered up, I think that we can get down to the brass tacks. My question to you is, if you could snap your fingers and make any fight happen, be it any MMA fighter, pugilist, kickboxer, nakmuay, wrestler, grappler, any two fighters in caps, and have them fight under any rule set and any type of ring in quote inverted commas, what would you choose? Keep up the good work, homie. From Ryan. I had a good think about this one, and I think Bill Superfoot Wallace and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Yeah, have a think about that one. I was pretty proud of that when I came up with it. I think them under either those ridiculous World Combat League rules, or I'd probably prefer in a ring under the kickboxing rules of Wallace's day. It'd be very interesting to see Thompson have to kickbox in a setting with barriers, because most of his kickboxing career was spent in that Chuck Norris organization with the big open mat. Nowhere to get crowded into corners, nowhere to get beaten up. And as much as Bill Wallace was famous for his kicks, he was very good with combinations on the inside, had a wicked left hook to the liver, good left hook to the head, and he used to do flurries of infighting with a weird loopy kick on the end. So he'd do like a left hook to the body, left uppercut up the center, and then a left hook kick. or he'd go left hook to the body, left hook to the head, and a left side kick as he faded away. Very cool inside combinations ending in outside kicking game. And of course there's that whole 3 kicks out of the same chamber that Thompson uses now, but Wallace was probably the best ever at it. So that'd be fascinating to see too, the fight on the outside. Now the interesting thing about Wallace is that he was a decent wrestler before he got into kickboxing. If he'd had time, if he'd come along at a different time, perhaps he'd have been a good MMA fighter. Another one. Maybe Choi whatever his name is, the amazing Letway guy. I don't know what size he is, but he always looks undersized in his fights. Maybe him versus Saenchai. They might be a bit far apart, so maybe him versus Borkow, but under Letway rules. I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. I think definitely Borkow and and Saenchai would be the more polished kickers. Both probably better technicians in the clinch too, but if you were thinking under Letway rules, what you want to see from Choi Mashong, or I can't say his name, bull guard to the inside, trying to dig in the elbows, smash the face with the headbutts, and just make a really rough, dirty fight out of it. But totally legal because it's Letway. And then I think Nick Diaz versus George St. Pierre in a fight to the death, because I've been informed that Nick Diaz would win that. Right, I'm getting facetious now. I'll leave that question be. Time for a couple from this week's Facebook thread. How do you think a Gastelum versus Robert Whittaker match would go? Oh, that sounds good. I think Gastelum might be able to tire him out with the pressure, because you got a guy who's got the strong wrestling base, but also just a great volume style of boxing against a counterpuncher who, even against the wild Derek Brunson, got stuck on the fence a couple of times. So might be able to tire him down. But then Gastelum is a small middleweight. He's just a big chubby welterweight. So maybe get tired over the distance. Maybe Whittaker would just be too strong for him, or hit too hard for him. Is Cowboy the new Crow Cop? Anyone have better head kicks than him currently? No, because he has combinations, and Crow Cop never had those. He's awesome. Looking brilliant. What more can you say? Overtaking Anthony Pettis is the best head kicker in the UFC. It seems that some fighters fight harder with the crowd on their side, or when motivated. Should confidence be considered a performance enhancer and be banned? Perhaps even ban the audience. Yes. Okay, thanks, Joel. How do you beat Max Holloway? Oh, I think we'll save that for after he beats... if he beats Aldo. We can have a Killing the King, maybe. What, if any, attributes should McGregor adapt if he wants to fight Floyd Mayweather? I think he should probably learn to box. That would be a good start. That's facetious, but the guy... They're worlds apart. You can watch Conor McGregor spar with a fairly decent boxer. That lad from South Africa, and his timing's way off. The guy scrambles his timing with jabs and feints and boxes him up. Could Frankie beat Max? He's never count Frankie Edgar out against anyone. The guy has so much creativity and grit. What are the best sources for older boxing and kickboxing footage? YouTube, I'm afraid. There's not much else going on out there. Fight Pass, I don't think, has bought the K1 library yet. Though I think Glory had the K1 library, and Glory's on Fight Pass, so who knows. What possible argument could be made for Tim Kennedy's relentless neon anus strikes over Kelvin Gastelum? Yeah, I bet those hurt. Getting kneed right in the hole. But he did seem to spend a lot of energy doing that, and there didn't seem to be much point. Is Lando Venata the coldest man alive? Yes, I forgot to talk about Lando Venata. He actually knocked out John McDacey with a combination that I said I wasn't a big fan of when Yair Rodriguez spammed it against Alex Caceres. The low-line sidekick into the wheel kick. But the difference was that Lando was just throwing out that side... Well, he wasn't even really throwing it. He was just placing it on McDacey's lead leg and making him take a step back and then move. And it was very lazy and lackadaisical, but it was still finding the mark. Whereas Yair Rodriguez kept going to stamp on Alex Caceres' lead leg, and Caceres would just run a mile. So what you saw was that Venata caught McDacey circling, whereas when Rodriguez was coming in with that low-line sidekick, Caceres was halfway across the octagon, and there was no hope of catching him with the wheel kick. But McDacey ran right into it, which was awesome, because creating collisions, that's what we're all about here. Hi Jack, I've asked you this on PMs a few times, but I never got a response. Oh yeah, sorry, I don't check my PMs at all. I understand that you're a busy man, but I figured... Can we get a brutally honest look at George St. Pierre versus Anderson Silva? I've heard it said a few times that Silva was too big for GSP, but I also don't think Silva ever faced a wrestler as good as GSP. That would hopefully prevent GSP from running face first into a counterpunch. Yeah, I should probably write that article at some point. I'd like to give that some more thought before I answer that. It's right, I think that'll do us for questions today. Send your emails to fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com, and I'll try and answer some more next week. What fights we got coming up over the weekend? Oh, Bellator has Satoshi Ishii headlining a fight night or whatever it is. That looks absolutely desperate. The co-main event of that is James Gallagher, 4-0 prospect out of Straight Blast Gym Island. And this is a weird one because they announced him as having this Russian opponent who had a decent record. And then it was never announced that guy was injured, as far as I can tell, but they just announced another opponent for James Gallagher, who is Anthony Taylor, 1-6 amateur record, 1-1 professional record, against your 4-0 prospect in the co-main event. So it's pretty obvious what they want to happen there. Nothing else on that card worth talking about because it's only got 5 fights on it and they're all pretty mediocre. And then the UFC on Fox 22, Paige Van Zant versus Michelle Waterson, alright fight. Oh, Uriah Faber's retirement match against Brad Pickett. I think that should be Brad Pickett's retirement match. I mean, he's been taking a beating lately. Sage Northcutt versus Mickey Gall. Oh, you couldn't pay me to care about that fight. And they've tried. To be honest, that fight does sort of make sense because Mickey Gall is the least accomplished fighter on the roster, and they had previously been bringing in people specifically to lose to Sage Northcutt, and he was still looking fairly meh. I don't know why it's like the third one down on the card, though, because, well, you know, whatever. Mike Perry versus Alan Jouban. That's the one to look forward to. His platinumness. Yeah, his interesting style of counterpunching where he takes the punches on his face and then swings back. And it actually works, so that'll be fun to watch. Yeah, not much else going on this card. Mizugaki versus Wineland is about the best fight I can see on there. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that next week if it's any good. I've been your boy Jack Slack. This has been Fights Gone By podcast. Join the Patreon. History episode coming out very soon. Send your emails to fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. Have a great week and Conor bless.